You know, when people look at Muslims praying, they often ask a simple question: why do they repeat the same words, the same movements, the same prayer for more than 1400 years? Why hasn't it changed? Why hasn't it been updated like so many other things in life? Let me tell you something. There's a reason, a deep reason. And if you listen closely, you'll realize it's not about repetition. It's about revelation. It's about connection. It's about discipline. And it's about truth that never fades. So let's break this down. 8 points, 8 reminders, 8 reasons why those words still stand strong today. You see, when we talk about prayer, when we talk about these words that have been recited over and over again for 1400 years, the first thing you've got to understand is this: they're not human words. They're not poetry written by some philosopher. They're not the lyrics of a song that somebody composed and passed down through tradition. These are words revealed by God Himself. And when something comes from the Creator of the universe, it doesn't fade, it doesn't weaken, it doesn't get old. It stands eternal. That's why Muslims pray the exact same words. Because they're not man's words. They're God's words. And God doesn't need an update. You don't need a new edition. You don't need a revision. What comes from heaven doesn't need editing by earth. And that's powerful. Think about that. Look around you today. Everything changes. Technology changes. Fashion changes. Slang changes. Even the way people talk to each other changes every few years. What was cool 10 years ago sounds outdated now. But prayer hasn't changed. And the reason it hasn't changed is because its source isn't temporary. Its source is divine. When a human being writes something, it has an expiration date. It might inspire for a while, but eventually people move on. It loses relevance. But the words inside it, they don't fade, they don't lose flavor. Because they weren't written by a man who lived in one place in one time. They were revealed by the one who created all places and all times. So they carry a freshness that outlives centuries. And here's the beauty of it. When you stand in prayer, when you recite those words, you are literally speaking the same divine language that the prophet himself recited over 1400 years ago. It's not a translation, it's not a rephrasing, it's not someone's interpretation. It's the exact words. That means when you pray, you're not just talking about God, you're speaking with the very words God revealed to humanity. That's a direct connection. That's purity. That's authenticity. Now let's be real for a second. Some people say, but why repeat the same words every day? Don't you get tired? Doesn't it lose meaning? And I'll tell you something, repetition only feels empty when the words come from man. But when the words come from God, repetition is power. Every time you say them, they hit a little deeper. Every time you recite them, your soul aligns a little more. It's not about boredom. It's about building a bond. It's like water. You drink water every day, right? The same water. Clear, tasteless, simple. You don't get bored. Why? Because your body needs it to survive. Prayer is the soul's water. You never get tired of it because your soul was built to thrive on it. And here's the thing, the words of prayer are not just a ritual. They're a reminder. They remind you of who you are and who your Creator is. They remind you that you came from Him and you'll return to Him. They remind you that no matter what the world throws at you, there's a place you can turn, a language that never gets lost in translation. You can't say that about any other text, any other piece of writing. Take a book written 500 years ago, and most people today struggle to even understand it. The language changes, the context shifts, the relevance feels distant. But the words of prayer, spoken centuries ago, spoken today, spoken tomorrow, they carry the same weight, the same clarity, the same meaning. That's divine design. And let me tell you why that matters, because life will hit you. Struggles will come. People will disappoint you. Promises will be broken. But when you kneel down, when you place your forehead on the ground, and you recite those words, you're tapping into something unshakable, something eternal, something that doesn't shift when the world shifts. That's why it matters that they're God's words, not man's. So, no, it's not about memorization. It's not about chanting. It's about connection. It's about the soul reaching out with words that were never tainted, never diluted, never rewritten. Words that are as alive today as the day they were revealed. That's why Muslims pray the same words, because they're not just words, they're the key, the code, the rope that ties the heart to the heavens. And I'll ask you this, when was the last time you spoke words that didn't just come out of your mouth, but came alive in your soul? When was the last time you recited something that wasn't written by man, but revealed by God? Because when you experience that, when you taste that, you understand why repetition is not routine. Repetition is renewal. That's why for 1400 years, generation after generation, billions of voices rise in unison with the exact same prayer. Because when you're speaking eternal words, you don't need new ones. When you talk about truth, you've got to understand something. Truth doesn't expire. It doesn't wear out. It doesn't break down with time. Truth isn't like milk in your refrigerator with a date stamped on the carton. No, truth is like the sun. It rises every single day, whether you notice it or not, whether you appreciate it or not, whether you believe in it or not, it's still there shining. That's what prayer is built on. That's why those same words are recited for 1400 years, because they carry truth, and truth never goes out of style. Now, we live in a world where everything changes. You scroll through your phone, and yesterday's news is already old. Social media makes you feel like what was trending 10 minutes ago doesn't matter anymore. Language shifts, culture shifts, values shift. What was considered right a few years ago might be mocked today, and what's celebrated today might be canceled tomorrow. But truth doesn't move with the crowd, it doesn't bend with the culture. It doesn't shift because people voted on it. Truth stands. And that's why prayer remains the same, because it is anchored in something eternal. You see, when Muslims pray, they're not just repeating history, they're stepping into truth. A truth that hasn't aged a single day since it was revealed. And that truth is bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than the world around us. That's why it hasn't changed. Because what's perfect doesn't need fixing. What's eternal doesn't need upgrading. Think about it like this. Imagine if every few decades the words of prayer were updated to match the new times. What would that even mean? Who gets to decide what's relevant? Politicians, scholars, popular opinion. If human beings edited those words, it wouldn't be prayer anymore. It would be man's attempt to keep up with trends. But when the source is God, there's no need to keep up because he's ahead of all time. He wrote yesterday, today, and tomorrow before you even opened your eyes. That's why his words don't fade. And you know this deep inside because think about the truths that govern your life. Gravity doesn't change. 2 + 2 is still 4. Water still quenches thirst. Fire still burns. These things don't evolve because they're fundamental truths. And if God created the physical universe with laws that don't expire, why would the spiritual laws he revealed expire? They don't. They endure. The prayer, those words, they remind you of the most important truth of all, that you are a creation and there is a creator, that you are not here by accident, that your life isn't random, that every breath has meaning because it's sustained by the one who gave it to you. That's the truth. And when you know it, when you live it, you can walk through the chaos of the world with peace because you're holding on to something unshakable. But here's where it gets real. People chase trends because they're searching for stability. They change their style, their speech, even their beliefs sometimes because they're looking for something that feels solid. But you'll never find stability in things that are designed to fade. You'll never find lasting peace in what's temporary. Prayer gives you what no fashion, no trend, no ideology can give, an anchor in timeless truth. That's why those same words are whispered in the silence of the night, spoken in crowded mosques, recited in deserts, in cities, in villages, in skyscrapers, in prisons, in palaces. Because no matter where you stand, the truth is the same. And when you speak it, it doesn't just remind you of God, it reminds you of who you are. It reminds you that you were built for something more than just existing, you were built to know Him. Now, let me ask you something. Look at your own life. How much of what you chase today will still matter 5 years from now? How much of what you worry about, what you stress over, what you lose sleep over, will it still matter 10 years from now? Probably not. But the truth about who you are and who created you, that will matter forever. That's why prayer never changed. That's why the same words still echo through time, because they're not chained to one generation, they're for every generation. So when someone asks, why say the same words for 1400 years? The answer is simple. Because truth doesn't need rewriting. Because truth is not a fashion statement. Because truth doesn't expire. And maybe the question for you is this: what truths are you living by right now? Are they things that will fade tomorrow, or are they things that will stand forever? Because at the end of the day, it's not about repeating old words. It's about holding on to the only truth that will never let you go. One of the most powerful things about prayer is that it unites. Not just in theory, not just in words, but in practice, in reality. You can travel anywhere on this earth, from the crowded streets of New York to the villages in Africa, from the deserts of Arabia to the snowy mountains of Central Asia. And when the call to prayer is heard, people gather. And when they gather, they stand shoulder to shoulder, feet aligned, hearts facing the same direction, reciting the exact same words. Think about that. Different languages, different colors, different backgrounds, different lives, but in that moment, all those differences dissolve. They become one body, one voice, one heartbeat. That's not just prayer. That's unity in its purest form. The world we live in constantly divides us. Politics divides us, wealth divides us, race divides us, culture divides us. Even families can be torn apart by differences. But when it's time to pray, when Muslims line up, none of that matters. The billionaire and the poor man, the scholar and the laborer, the elder and the child, they all stand in the same row. Nobody's in front because of money, nobody's pushed back because of status. Everybody bows down before the same creator. That's a unity the world can't manufacture. That's not a slogan on a billboard. That's not a campaign speech. That's lived 5 times a day by millions of people across the globe. And it's not just unity in space. It's unity in time. Because when you pray those same words, you're not just uniting with the people next to you, you're uniting with the people who prayed before you centuries ago. You're joining a chain that stretches back to the Prophet himself. Imagine that for a second. Every generation, billions of people, reciting the exact same words, moving in the exact same way, connecting themselves to one another through time. Prayer becomes more than a ritual. It becomes a river flowing through history, carrying every believer in its stream. That's why it's so powerful. Because in a world that constantly tells you you're alone, that nobody understands you, that you're isolated, prayer reminds you that you are part of something much bigger. You are part of a community that spans oceans and centuries. You're never alone when you bow your head, because somewhere, someone else is bowing with you, saying the exact same words at the exact same time. Now ask yourself, what else in this world unites people like that? Nations struggle to stay united. Families struggle to stay united. Companies split, movements collapse, alliances break. But prayer has held this unity for 1,400 years and counting. No army could hold that kind of power together. No government could enforce it. It's only possible because it's not built on human ambition. It's built on divine instruction. That's why it works. That's why it lasts. And here's the thing. When you feel that unity, when you stand shoulder to shoulder, you learn something about life. You learn that your ego doesn't make you better than the person beside you. You learn that no matter how much you achieve, when it's time to bow, you bow like everybody else. That humbles you, that equalizes you, that teaches you respect. But beyond that, it gives you strength. Because when you pray, you don't just feel your own voice rising. You feel the voice of an entire ummah, an entire nation carrying you, lifting you, reminding you that you are not walking this path alone. That's why people who pray can endure struggles others can't, because they know they're backed by something greater than themselves. And I want you to imagine this. Imagine a stadium filled with millions of people chanting the same words. You feel the vibration, the energy, the force. Now multiply that across the earth, not once, but 5 times a day, every single day for over 1,000 years. That's not noise, that's harmony. That's not routine, that's power. So the question isn't why Muslims pray the same words. The question is, how can words that unite billions across history, across continents, across languages, be anything less than miraculous? How can something that erases division, that humbles kings and raises the poor, that ties the present to the past, be anything less than extraordinary? And maybe the deeper question is this: what are you connected to? What are you aligning yourself with? Something temporary or something eternal? Are you standing with the world that divides or with the prayer that unites? Because once you taste that kind of unity, once you feel that kind of connection, you'll never look at prayer the same way again. One of the most beautiful lessons of prayer is how it keeps you grounded. And I mean that literally and spiritually. Because let's be honest, the world has a way of making people forget who they are. You achieve something, you get that promotion, you buy that car, you close that deal, and suddenly you start thinking you're untouchable. You start believing your own hype. But then the call to prayer comes, and you put all of that aside and you bow. You bend your back. You press your forehead to the floor. That right there is a reminder that no matter how high you rise, you're still a servant. You're still a creation. You're still dependent on the one who created you. And think about that for a second. What else in life does that for you? In this world, people celebrate you for standing tall, for being confident, for showing off your strength. But prayer flips the script. Prayer says true strength is not in standing above others, but in bowing before God. True greatness is not in how high you stand, but in how low you're willing to humble yourself. That's what keeps you grounded. And let's be real, we need that. Because without it, ego takes over. Pride takes over, and pride will destroy you. History is filled with kings, rulers, empires that thought they were too powerful, too important, too unstoppable, until it all crumbled. Because arrogance disconnects you from reality. But prayer brings you back. Prayer humbles you 5 times a day and whispers, remember, you're not the source of your own power. Remember, every blessing you have was given, not earned alone. Remember, one day you'll return to the one you bow to right now. That's grounding. That's perspective. And it's not just about pride. Prayer keeps you grounded when life throws the opposite at you too. When the weight of the world pushes down on you, when you feel small, when you feel forgotten, when you feel broken, prayer lifts you. You put your head on the ground, but your heart rises above your pain. You bow down physically, but your soul stands tall. Isn't that something? The same act that humbles the proud also heals the broken. That's why it's so powerful. It meets you where you are, whether you're flying high or crawling low, and it centers you. It keeps you balanced, and we all need balance, because life will pull you in every direction. Ambition pulls you one way, desire another, fear another, pain another. Without balance, you'll lose yourself. Prayer brings you back to the center. It reminds you that you're not defined by your money, your title, your failures, or your struggles. You're defined by your connection to the one who made you. That's your grounding point. That's your anchor. Now let's think about the movements themselves. Standing, bowing, kneeling, pressing your forehead to the ground. Do you realize what that does to the soul? It's a physical expression of humility. You can't fake it. You can't put your forehead on the ground and still believe you're higher than everyone else. It forces your body to teach your heart humility. And that humility doesn't stay in prayer. It walks with you. It changes how you treat people. It changes how you carry yourself. It changes how you see the world. Because if you can bow before God, you can't mistreat his creation. That's why prayer is not just a ritual, it's training. It's spiritual conditioning. It's a daily reminder that keeps you human in a world that tempts you to act like a god. It's a practice that keeps you small enough to remember your need for him and strong enough to face whatever life throws at you. So when you see Muslims pray, don't just see it as a routine. See it for what it really is, a discipline that humbles the heart and elevates the soul. A discipline that breaks arrogance and builds character. A discipline that teaches you how to walk through this life without losing yourself. That's what it means to be grounded. And let me ask you this, what keeps you grounded? What brings you back to balance when the world pushes and pulls you in 1,000 directions? What reminds you that no matter what you have, no matter what you lose, your worth isn't defined by this world? Because if you don't have something grounding you, life will spin you in circles until you forget who you are. Prayer is that grounding force. And once you experience it, you'll never want to walk through life without it again. People look at prayer from the outside, and sometimes they think it's just ritual. They see people standing, bowing, kneeling, rising, repeating the same words, and they think it's mechanical, automatic, empty. But if you've ever tasted it from the inside, if you've ever felt what those words do to your heart, you know it's not just a ritual. It's a connection. It's a conversation. It's intimacy with the one who created you. Think about it. When you pray, you're not talking to yourself. You're not reciting a poem. You're not chanting for tradition. You are speaking directly to the creator of the heavens and the earth, and he hears you. Every word, every whisper, every pause, every tear. The world may not notice your struggles, but God notices. The people around you may not understand your pain, but God understands. Prayer is the meeting point between the limited and the limitless, between weakness and strength, between the created and the creator. And what's amazing is that the same words you recite, words revealed 1,400 years ago, they don't stay on the tongue, they travel into the heart. Every phrase is like a key that unlocks something inside you. When you say, all praise belongs to God, you're not just reciting words, you're shifting your focus. You're pulling yourself out of self-pity, out of arrogance, out of distraction, and you're remembering who really deserves the credit. When you say, the most merciful, the most compassionate, you're not just repeating a title, you're reminding yourself that no matter how far you've fallen, you're speaking to a Lord who forgives, who heals, who loves beyond imagination. That's not ritual, that's relationship. And here's where it becomes even more powerful. Prayer is structured. It has steps, it has words, it has form. But inside that form is your heart, your emotion, your personal cry. Two people can stand next to each other, reciting the same exact verses, moving in the same way. But each one is experiencing something different, because prayer reflects what's inside you. If you walk into it distracted, prayer pulls you back. If you walk into it broken, prayer mends you. If you walk into it grateful, prayer lifts you higher. It's the same structure, but the connection is personal. That's the miracle. Think about how rare that is. We live in a world that's obsessed with customization. Everyone wants their own playlist, their own profile, their own lane. But prayer is the only thing that can be universal and personal at the same time. Everyone recites the same words, but those words speak to each heart in a different language. One person finds healing, another finds clarity, another finds strength. The words don't change, but the way they land in your soul is unique. That's divine design. And let's be real, life can make you feel disconnected. Disconnected from yourself, disconnected from others, disconnected from hope. Prayer plugs you back in. It's like charging your phone. You don't complain. Why do I have to keep charging it every day? You know the answer. Because it runs out, because it needs power to function. Your heart, your soul, they're the same. Without prayer, they run empty. With prayer, they recharge. That's why people who pray regularly carry a kind of peace that others can't explain. Because they've learned the secret. They've learned that it's not about empty ritual, it's about direct access. Direct access to the one who knows you better than you know yourself. Direct access to the one who can take your problems and turn them into lessons, your pain and turn it into strength, your weakness and turn it into resilience. That's connection. And when you realize that, you stop seeing prayer as an obligation and start seeing it as a privilege. You stop asking, why do I have to pray? And you start asking, how could I live without it? Because once you've experienced that connection, once you've felt the calm that comes from putting your forehead on the ground and whispering to the one who created you, nothing else compares. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you stopped running, stopped scrolling, stopped stressing, and actually connected? Not to Wi-Fi, not to your social feed, not to people's opinions, but to the one who gave you life. Because that's the connection that will never fail, never disconnect, never run out of signal. That's what prayer is. That's why it's not just ritual, it's the lifeline of the soul. One of the greatest miracles of prayer is how it has protected the original message. And I don't mean protected in the sense of keeping it in a museum behind glass where people can look but not touch. I mean protected in living hearts, protected on living tongues, protected in the rhythm of daily life. For 1400 years, the same prayer has been recited word for word, syllable for syllable, exactly as it was revealed. That means no editor has touched it, no ruler has altered it, no culture has rewritten it. It's the same today as it was in the time of the prophet. And that's not just history. That's preservation on a level the world has never seen before. You see, when something is valuable in this world, people change it. They rebrand it. They modify it to fit the times. Languages evolve, manuscripts get updated. Even entire religions have seen their texts rewritten or revised to match a generation. But prayer has never changed. The same Arabic words, the same phrases, the same verses spoken by a shepherd in the desert 1400 years ago are spoken today in the heart of New York, in the middle of London, in villages in Africa, in the skyscrapers of Dubai. The same sound, the same message. That's not coincidence. That's divine protection. And it's powerful because it means no matter where you are, no matter what area you live in, when you step into prayer, you are stepping into authenticity. You're not getting someone's interpretation. You're not hearing a watered down version. You're not receiving the modern edition. You're holding on to the original. Imagine being able to say that about anything else in life. You can't. Books get translated, laws get amended, cultures shift. But the words of prayer remain untouched. That's why when Muslims pray, they're confident. They're not guessing. They're not unsure if what they're saying is authentic. They know these are the same words recited by the prophet himself, the same words memorized by his companions, the same words carried by millions upon millions across centuries. That kind of preservation doesn't happen by accident. That's the hand of God. And think about what that means. It means no matter what people do to try and erase the message, they can't. Empires have risen and fallen. Colonizers tried to silence it. Enemies tried to burn it. But the prayer lives on. You can burn books, but you can't erase what's written on the hearts of millions. You can try to silence voices, but when a billion people recite the same words every single day, those voices become unstoppable. That's what makes prayer indestructible. Now let's be honest, we live in a world where authenticity is rare. Everybody filters, edits, curates, changes the truth to make it look better, to make it sell, to make it fit in. But prayer reminds you of something raw, something real, something untouchable. It tells you this is the original, this is the unaltered, this is the truth as it was given. And that's something people crave today. Because deep down, nobody wants fake, nobody wants counterfeit, people want what's real. And here's where it gets deeper. That preservation isn't just about the words. It's about the connection those words create. Because if the words had been changed, if the prayer had been tampered with, that chain between you and the prophet would have been broken. But it wasn't. That chain is unbroken. That means when you pray, you're not just imitating, you're participating, you're standing in the same current of worship that has flowed unbroken for centuries. That's legacy. That's power. And I want you to picture it. Picture a child in some corner of the world, barely old enough to speak, learning the same words their ancestors spoke. Picture an elder on their deathbed, whispering those same words with their final breaths. Picture an entire line of humanity, generation after generation, holding on to the same sound, the same truth. That's preservation. That's God's promise fulfilled. So when someone asks, why do Muslims still pray the same words? The answer isn't just because they're divine. It's because they've been protected. It's because they're untouchable. It's because God himself preserved them so no man could corrupt them. And now I'll ask you, what are you holding on to in your life that's authentic? What truth do you have that hasn't been twisted, altered, or watered down by the world? Because if you don't have something original, something preserved, something untouchable, you'll always be left chasing after copies. But when you stand in prayer, you don't have to chase. You have the original right there on your tongue, alive in your heart. And once you know that, you'll never trade authenticity for imitation again. So when you step back and look at it, you see the picture. For 1400 years, the words of prayer have stayed the same, not because people were stubborn, not because they refused to change, but because they didn't need to change. They were divine, and divine doesn't expire. They were truth, and truth doesn't fade. They were unity, and unity doesn't crumble when it's rooted in God. They were grounding, keeping the proud humble and the broken strong. They were connection, a lifeline between heaven and earth. They were preserved, untouchable, unshakable, unchanged. They were repetition, not for the sake of routine, but for the sake of power, engraving truth deeper with every word. And they were legacy, passed from generation to generation, a chain that cannot be broken. That's why Muslims pray the same words. Because those words are not just history, they are eternity. They are not just recited, they are lived. They are not just sounds in the air, they are anchors for the soul. And the question isn't why the same words for 1400 years. The real question is, what words are you building your life on? Words that shift with every generation. Words that fade with every season, or words that carry you, preserve you, ground you, unite you, and connect you to something far greater than yourself. Because if 1400 years have proven anything, it's this: when words come from God, they don't just survive, they transform. They don't just last, they lift. They don't just remain, they reign. So I'll leave you with this. The next time you see a Muslim bow in prayer, don't just see repetition, see revelation. Don't just see ritual, see a living miracle. And ask yourself, what's keeping you grounded, connected, and alive?